Hi, everybody. Today's lesson is going to be on staff notation. So staff notation is made up of 5 lines and 4 spaces. Each one of these lines or spaces indicates a note from the musical alphabet. In staff notation, sometimes we can see different clefs. Clefs are these symbols here that indicate what range we are performing in. So this would be our treble clef, and this would be our bass clef. So that's going to change which notes appear in those lines and spaces. So up here in the treble clef, I'm going to add a note. Then I'm going to add one in the space. Then I'm going to add one on the line again. Then in the space, on the line again, in the space, on the line. And we're just going up the musical alphabet. G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. At this point, we've run out of lines, so if we want to move on to the next note, we use what are called ledger lines. So we draw a line above, and then we indicate our note on that floating line. This would give us an A. Here's an example on the bass clef. So when you see the notes moving upward like this, here on the treble clef, you can understand that those pitches are moving upward in pitch. And when you see the notes moving downward here, you can see that they're moving downward in pitch. Now, notes can move up and downward on either clef. So you could have a note here, then here, then here. And those notes would be going upward, then downward. All right? So when you see both of these together, the treble clef and the bass clef, that's called the grand staff. And they're connected by this sort of invisible line in the middle. That invisible line is usually drawn as a ledger line that looks like this. And that's indicated with C. This is usually called middle C. So on the guitar, the range is a little bit different, and some of those notes on the guitar can go down towards the bass register. So you might see guitar music written on the staff like this, with lots of extra ledger lines. So as you can see, we have the same thing written out in tablature underneath. E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. And you can see it's going up in pitch. So you can play along here with the low E string open, then the first fret, third fret, then open on the next string, second fret, third fret, and etc. And you can compare to see what the staff notation looks like in relationship to what you're playing on the guitar. Okay, let's talk a little bit about note duration. So there are some various types of notes. They usually have different symbols or indicators to tell us how they're different. For example, we've got the whole note, which looks like a kind of open circle. Then we have the half note, which looks like an open circle, but with a stick. Then we've got the quarter note, which looks like the last one, but filled in. Then we start to see what are called flags. So, and then it has a flag coming off of it. And then there are sometimes 2 flags, and so on. So this is called a whole note. This is a half. This is a quarter. This is an 8. This is a 16. This is a 32nd. And they continue on from there, going faster and faster. So these are the ones you're going to see most often. So those are the ones that I'm going to show you today. Let's take, for example, that we are playing in a time signature. We'll call it 4/4. This means that within one bar, this line here is going to determine how long a bar is. By the way, this is a bar line, so that's another thing we can learn about. Within this bar, or this unit of time, it is possible to fit 4 quarter notes. So that's what 4/4 means. 4 quarter notes. Let's do it on F. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 quarter notes will last 1 bar. We would count that 1, 2, 3, 4. If we wanted to label it, it would be the note F, F, F. So those notes would happen over and over again. F, 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 F. Let's take a look at the whole note. So the whole note lasts for 4 beats. So we're going to put our count here again, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this time, this F is actually going to drag out for this whole time. So it's going to be an F, but it's going to last for the duration of 4 beats. And that's what this symbol here, the whole note, means, that it lasts for the whole bar. Now let's take a look at the half note. So I'm going to place 2 half notes here on F. We can place our count here, 1, 2, 3, 4. And each one of these is going to last for 2 beats. We can think of that as half of the bar. We could change this around. That might make it a little bit easier to visualize if we did, say, for example. So now, on the 3rd beat, we have A. And A lasts for half of the bar. F lasts for half, A lasts for half. That's why it's called a half note. Okay, now let's take a look at quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this means we're going to be saying the F, F, F over and over again. So now we've moved on to 8th notes. And as we can see, there are 8 of them that exist within our bar. We're going to need to change our counting system around a little bit. So we're going to add the symbol here. This looks like a plus sign, but we're going to read this as and. So we're going to actually count this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You see? And so in that way, we can fit 8 beats within our cycle of 4 beats because we're subdividing. So everything's getting smaller, and so it's getting faster. As you can see now, I've added in 16th notes. So that's a lot of notes crammed in here. We're going to call this a bar. And so that's 16 of these notes can fit within 1 bar of 4/4. And when we count that, we count it like this. So also, by the way, each one of these notes is an F. So it's like F, 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 over and over again. So when we count this, we're going to count it 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and. And the reason we do that is that we give a specific little name to each subdivision so that later when we go to try and read music and figure out the rhythm, we have a nice simple system that helps us kind of sound it out. Okay, so now let's talk about dotted notes. So basically what a dotted note is that once you place a dot after the note, it increases the value of that note by half of its original value. Okay, so I'm going to remove the dot. And right now, the way the music is written out, we would count it like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And each one of these beats would be counted for 2, right? So they would last for this duration. So for example, this is an A, so it would be A and then continue, and then A and then continue, right? But now we're going to add a dot in, and we're going to see how it changes. So now that I've added my dot in, I'm going to have to change the way the music is written out. This is going to have to change its value in order for it to fit inside a bar of 4/4. So now when we count this, we're going to count it 1, 2, 3, 4. So this A here is going to last this long. Then this A is going to last until the end of the bar. All right, in this next example, we've got 4 quarter notes. We've done this a few times now. Now, if we start to add dots to this, we're going to have to change it around like we did previously. If I add a dot here, and I add a dot here, we're going to have to change the way we count this. So the dotted is going to be equal to 1.5 quarter notes. So it would end up looking something like this. I left the numbers in the bottom, but you would actually not count those other numbers. Okay, let's take a look at the tie. The tie is another thing that will allow us to alter the duration. And as you can see here, the tie basically works across the bar to extend the duration of the note. So you might count that some 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. See, we're extending this out, and that's extension is going across this bar line here. Next, we should talk a little bit about rests. So each one of these symbols that I've drawn on here represents what's called a rest. And a rest is basically a pause in the music. It's a time in which you don't play anything, and therefore you rest. So it represents silence, but for a specific duration. We don't think about that all the time, but music is also about what we're not playing as much as it is about what we are playing. So for example, each one of these symbols here above are going to equal silence for the amount of time as equal to the musical notation below it. So this one here that looks like a little downward facing top hat, that's going to be a silence or a rest for the duration of a whole note. So this is a half rest, see? This one is how long? That's right, 1/4. This one is an 1/8 note rest. And this one is a 16th note rest. So when you're reading sheet music, you're going to see both musical notes and also rests, because in between beats and beat variations, you're going to pause. All right, now let's take a look at some music in action. Here I've got E, G, B, D written out in quarter notes. And if we replace one of those, it's going to be counted like this: 1, 3, 4. And then this would just act as a rest, so we wouldn't say anything there. 1, 3, 4. 1, 3, 4. Or you could say the word rest. 1 rest, 3, 4. 1 rest, 3, 4. And this can be a really helpful way of trying to count out what's written on the sheet music so that you can recreate it on your instrument. Now we have to talk a little bit about accidentals. So now that we know how to read the notes on the staff, we may run into instances where there may be accidentals present. So those are marked with particular symbols. You can see the symbols here. These are the most common symbols that you're going to note. This little B looks like a flat. The hashtag looks like a sharp. And these kind of 2 7s are the natural symbol. Now these over here are going to be less likely that you run into, but I thought I'd put them up here just so you could see that there's lots of different types of symbols used to qualify the note and to give you guidance about, what to do with the particular note. Sorry, here we have the note C. So if we want to change this C around, we can put an accidental in front of it. So in the second instance here, I will put the hashtag symbol, and now this becomes the note C sharp, which is 1/2 step or semitone away from C. So if we look on our chart here, this is C to C sharp. And then this is how you would write that. So here we have a B. But let's say we wanted to change that to a B flat. We could put the symbol for flat right in front of it. And this would now indicate that this note is no longer a B, but is now a B flat. You always try to put the accidental in front, because when you're reading this way side to side, you want to make sure that you can see that accidental right away. Otherwise, you can get confused. And now let's say, for example, you're playing in a key, and in that particular key, a note is sharp. So for example, here we have the letter F. Let's say we were playing in the key of G. In the key of G, F is normally sharp. So if you were following the key and you saw this note, you would automatically assume that it's supposed to be sharp. But if you needed to play it natural, you would make the natural symbol. So this is where that symbol comes into play. So before that, that's going to indicate to us that this is a natural note. All right, so let's take a look at another example here. On this final two notes here, I'm going to put one accidental in front of this one and one accidental in front of this one. And so now that note that normally exists is a D, but now it becomes a D sharp, and this one becomes a D flat. Let's take a look at accidentals in action. So here we have the C minor scale. The C minor scale consists of 3 flats. You can see those marked here: E flat, A flat, B flat. This brings me to my next topic, which is key signature. If we take those flats and remove them from the scale and apply them here, we can lay out the key without having to mark the accidentals on the staff. So now when you look at the front here, you'll see each flat is marked on the stave at the position where it would be if it was a note. For example, we have A flat, which lives here in this space. And then if we follow it all the way over here, this flat symbol lives in the space. So when we're reading the staff, we know right away from looking up, A is going to be flat in this case, so we automatically make it flat. For example, E flat here, which is on the staff here, this one is actually marked up here in the space for E. And B flat here, which lives here. All right, this one is marked over here on the line, B flat. Finally, we can talk about mnemonic devices to help us remember what the individual note names are and where they live on the staff. So here I've got the grand staff, and I've got the notes labeled for both the treble and the bass. And I'll show you a few common tricks that people use to remember. Every good boy deserves fudge. Here on the bass clef, good burritos don't fall apart. Here in the spaces, it spells face, space, face. That's a way to remember. All cows eat grass. Here on the bass clef, where the spaces are. But potentially the easiest way to think about it is to just think about the order of the English alphabet. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, etc. So as long as you are constantly thinking in that order, then you can't get confused. So if you're on this note and you're wondering what the next note is, just think about the next letter in the English alphabet. Well, I hope this was helpful. We'll see you next time.